Hey guys, BLUEOJ Leader here, and welcome to the first episode of the Plarail Friends Retrospective. I can't tell you how many people have asked me for this series, because basically everybody in the Thomas fandom watches my videos. But today is finally the day, folks. The day you've all been waiting for. The day where we begin this multi-year long journey of the retrospective of Thomas and his Plarail friends, the greatest fan series humanity has ever known. Now, we're just going to get started right away so that we don't waste any time, but before we get started, let's not forget that my opinion is fact and everything I say is the truth. So if you're going to parrot a YouTuber's opinion and claim it as your own, it better be mine. But with that being said, let's just get started, shall we? Here is the Season 1 retrospective of Thomas and his Plarail friends. Let's take a trip back to 2017. Our story begins with a 12-year-old boy named Owen Bartel. Owen loved Thomas and Friends as a kid. He had a ton of the toys and a lot of the DVDs. Over time though, and as he grew older, he fell out of love with this series. It wasn't cool to like Thomas and Friends anymore. It was all about Ninjago, Captain Underpants, and Pokemon. It wasn't until middle school where Owen slowly got back into Thomas and Friends. He used to secretly watch old Thomas episodes every morning. He began catching up with the current show and eventually discovered other Thomas YouTubers. And this discovery would soon inspire Owen to make videos of his own. In mid-2017, Owen Bartel filmed 11 Wooden Railway remakes with help from his little brother. None of these have been released officially, and who's to say if they will ever surface. But Owen enjoyed making these. His interest in filming and editing was forming rapidly. Though over the course of filming these remakes, it was clear that Owen was beginning to resent filming with Wooden Railway. He claimed they were too cumbersome to work with, and he wanted to upgrade to Trackmaster and Plarail. He had seen them in other videos and thought they were much cooler. So, with his birthday money, he went to Amazon and bought Thomas, Percy, Talking James, and Edward, as well as some great track for them to run on. Now, the original intention was to keep making remakes. One of these remakes that Owen had imagined was Percy's Promise. In fact, Owen had already fully filmed a remake of Thomas and the Trucks. Sadly, this remake was never edited and all the footage has been lost to time. Owen was frustrated because he didn't have enough engines to remake stories with. But then, he had an idea. What if he made his own story? A story that only used characters that he had, and then he'd go and try to film it. So that's what he did. And thus, James and the Silly Trucks, the very first episode of Thomas and his Plarail friends, was born. And the rest, as they say, is history. Before we continue, a couple of things should be noted about the production. 1. This first season was very much Owen learning as he went along. The first 2 episodes didn't actually have scripts. The narrations were mostly improvised by Owen. However, actual scripts were written for the remaining episodes. 2. The episodes in this season were all filmed chronologically, so because of that, any improvements made to the set between episodes were very noticeable. Stuff like a sky background, to changes in the tracks used, to changes in the ground beneath the engines. It's very interesting seeing in real time this creator evolve. 3. It should also be noted that the first 5 episodes were originally under the series name Tomika Thomas and Friends, later BLUEOJ'S Tomika Thomas and Friends. This was likely changed so that Diesel D199 couldn't sue Owen for stealing a name for a series that did not belong to him. Although to be frank, I find Thomas and his Plarail friends to be a much better name than Tomika Thomas and Friends. I mean, what kind of hack fraud with 2 subscribers would come up with a name like that? But anyways, the first 5 episodes of Season 1 were released as one mega video on June 14th, 2018, with episode 6 being released on June 24th, and the 10th and final episode of Season 1 being released on December 16th. So with that being said, let's take a look at it all. Revisiting Season 1 is interesting, to say the least. Let's get this out of the way. It is hard to watch a lot of these episodes. And do I need to elaborate? Look at this. There are so many bizarre mistakes and weird looking sets, especially in the early episodes. It's far from good and absolute child's play compared to what we see later. With that said, however, as easy it is to clown on this, I'm not going to completely. I mean, this was Owen's first attempt, so I'm gonna try to look at it for what it is. Because, let's be honest, Season 1 is kind of charming. Like, the fact that it is basically just child's play makes it more endearing. Seeing some things that weren't figured out yet, and then figured out very quickly, some things included for a little bit and then scrapped, it's all very rough, but you can see a vision. With a little more refinement, this could be something special. And I believe that is why Owen would later go on to remake several of these episodes. But that is a discussion for another day. One thing that is sort of interesting to look back on with Season 1 is how it evolves. As the season goes on, new characters get added to Owen's collection, as well as new themes for set decoration. Compare Episode 1 to Episode 9 and it's night and day. You can see how much has changed. On one hand, it's cool to see how the season improved over time, but on the other hand, it makes this season very inconsistent in retrospect. Especially considering how later seasons were filmed more consistently. It makes each episode stand out more from each other, but to what end? Consider the fact that the intro is essentially remade every time. At a certain point, I just wish this season was filmed entirely like episodes 1 and 2, or at the very least do one major set change and nothing else. It's just so rough. And unfortunately, it isn't helped by the multiple tech issues. Apparently, Owen didn't have a microphone at the time, so he just used the computer microphone for everything. And it shows. Many times the audio will cut out randomly, and there's random noises in the background, and overall it just doesn't sound good. I mean, Owen's narration isn't the worst, like, it's not great, but there's some good moments. Though it doesn't really matter because all the audio issues ruin it. Visually things are a little better. There's clearly not any proper lighting or anything like that, but everything is visually comprehensible. Though I do have to mention these weird looking freeze frames. They were used to show engine stopping and starting again, and it started during the second half of Season 1. And they look very ugly. Sometimes in the first half, it cut from a picture taken before the video, and while it didn't look great either, sometimes it looked pretty good. And looking back, it probably would have been better to do this in the long run. Thankfully, this editing trick would eventually disappear in later seasons, but it did stay for a long time, and man, did it look weird. But with that being said, what frustrates me the most about Season 1 isn't the fact it's so rough. In my opinion, what frustrates me the most about Season 1 is the fact that I see the potential. I think most of the episode concepts for this season are good, and if some of these stories were in any other season besides the first one, I think they would have been truly great. And while it makes the eventual remakes of some of these episodes so great, it doesn't really make the first season any better, especially when you know you could be watching better versions of these stories. It almost feels like when I'm being positive about Season 1, it's coming more from what it could be rather than what it actually is. It's kinda sad, honestly. I'll always appreciate Season 1 for being the first, but this is definitely one of those cases where the show only really gets better, and the first season is just kind of rough in comparison. In terms of who did stuff this year, in third place we have James with 2 lead roles. In second place we have Gordon and Percy with 3 lead roles. And in first place, to no one's surprise, we have Thomas with 5 lead roles. Interestingly enough, with the exception of Spencer, only Steam Team members got episodes this season. I have to assume this is because Owen didn't have many toys when writing these episodes, so he just worked with what he had. This isn't bad or anything, I just thought it was interesting, especially since later seasons of Thomas and his Plarail friends like to use all sorts of random characters. It makes Season 1 look very restrained in comparison. Let's get things off by first talking about Edward. Considering that Edward is Owen's favorite character, it was shocking to see that he didn't star in a single episode. It's disappointing to say the least. I mean, Edward is the best character after all, and you can't have any other opinion. Though with that being said, whenever Edward did show up, he was in character, and at least he got the last laugh in a splendid showdown. That was pretty cool. It's a shame the same can't be said for Henry. His only episode was basically a worse version of Haunted Henry, and unfortunately, the scared, nervous side of his character basically became the template for him in later seasons, which is truly a shame. Owen definitely could have done more with him. Toby also kinda got the short end of the stick. It's not like he was poorly portrayed or anything, but his characterization kinda seemed like an afterthought. You can tell Owen really didn't know how to write for Toby in the beginning, so he just defaulted to a basic story of him saving the day. It's not that Toby isn't cool and Toby saves the day, he just doesn't really feel like Toby. Like he could have been replaced with any character and the story would have been the same. I don't know, maybe this is just my opinion, but I really feel like Toby could have been written better this season. Now for Emily, who's a character I'm a little mixed on this season. Owen leans into the new series Betrayal a lot for her episode. And while I don't love that version of her character and it isn't my perfect version of Emily, I think A Splendid Showdown did a good job of portraying this side of her character. It feels like an Emily and James episode plucked right out of season 9. You can take that as a compliment or not, I don't really care. But at least Emily wasn't treated badly this year. Speaking of James, let's talk about him for a bit. And when I say a bit, I mean it. I really don't have much to say about how he was handled. He was handled well. It's hard to mess up a boastful and vain character like him. You could tell Owen liked writing for him, and it makes sense that he, of all characters, was the star of the first Plarail Friends episode. I also feel similarly about how Spencer was handled. Again, he's a boastful, vain character that's hard to mess up. Not much else to add. Gordon definitely got some love this year. We mainly got to see his arrogant side in Gordon's Night Train and Toby Saves the Day, but we also got to see Gordon be more of a hero in A Snowy Surprise for Spencer. It's nice to see him be more than just a pompous jerk. He's more layered than that, and I'm glad Owen didn't forget that. Percy also had a solid year. He was a key player in the first episode as well as the co-lead of Season 1's two-parter. His friendship with Thomas was the main thing focused on this year, and I think it was done well. From having solid camaraderie to having the bond strained to ultimately coming out the other side stronger. Even if Percy's personality didn't shine too much, his friendship with Thomas was very apparent and very well handled. But I think it's clear that the MVP of Season 1 rightfully goes to Thomas. Having the most episodes definitely helped this case, but I feel like each episode showed a different side to him. James in the Silly Trucks showed his cheeky side, Thomas in the Two Dimensions showed his done with life side, the two-parter showed his more arrogant and angry side, and A Crack in the Track showed his more kind and caring side. We got to see the whole spectrum of Thomas this year, and it's very well done. Owen definitely knows how to write for Thomas, and that's why I believe he's the MVP for Season 1. Season 1 only had 10 episodes, which isn't a lot compared to Thomas Friends, which usually had 26. But that doesn't mean there weren't any episodes worth talking about, because there's a lot to say about some of these episodes. I'd say that the standout episode of Season 1 would have to be A Snowy Surprise for Spencer. As stated before, it's the only episode in Season 1 that stars a character who isn't a member of the STEAM team. It's also a winter episode, so that makes it stand out. But the biggest reason is the fact that it is quite possibly the most well-made episode of Season 1. Good sets, good editing, good story. There's a reason that Owen picked this episode to be included on the Plarail Friends Classic DVD. It's a testament to how much Season 1 has grown, and thus, I have to respect it, and I have to call it the standout of Season 1. As for the worst episode, I'm going to have to pick Thomas and the Two Dimensions. A part of me considered putting this episode as the standout, but unlike A Snowy Surprise for Spencer, it doesn't really stand out for the right reasons. Thomas and the Two Dimensions is a wooded railway and Plarail crossover episode. That alone is an absolutely insane idea for what seemed to be an otherwise normal Thomas fan series. Not to mention that it's also the second episode of the whole series. Like, what? That's so early. This really couldn't have been saved for later? But okay, ignoring the absurdity of the concept and the placement of this episode, I still think it's not very good. It's not funny, it's boring, it has stupid dialogue, it doesn't really have anything to say. I mean, the episode does the intro twice and it feels so unnecessary. Thomas in the Two Dimensions feels more like an excuse for Owen to whine about his frustrations about Wooden Railway rather than tell a funny or meaningful story. In my opinion, there was really no other episode that could possibly be worse, other than maybe The Flying Creeper, but at least that had funny costumes and the introduction of Rhombus, which was kinda cool. Thomas in the Two Dimensions was just a waste of time. Honestly, Owen should have given Edward an episode instead of making this abomination. Worst of the season. As for the sum up, I think I'm going to have to give it to A Crazy Day for Thomas and Percy. This episode has a lot of the usual Season 1 quirks. It's an episode that stars Thomas, it has a basic name, it's got a crash, which is weirdly a common occurrence in Season 1, it's a bit of a sillier idea, it has some weird visual and audio issues, including an Owen who sounds very sick while recording. And it has a set that is completely different from ones used in any other episode. This episode pretty much has everything I think of when I think of Season 1, which is why it is my pick for the sum up. But my favorite episode of Thomas and His Plarail Friends Season 1 is Special Friends. The part 2 to the part 1 that was A Crazy Day for Thomas and Percy. Special Friends is a good one. There's some episodes that have good stories but a lot of tech issues, and some that have okay stories with very little to no tech issues, but Special Friends is an example of having both a good story and little tech issues. The editing is good, the dialogue is good, I like this bed that they used for Toby's branch line, I thought it was cute, but the part I like the most is how Thomas and Percy's friendship was tested. After the cliffhanger that was the ending of A Crazy Day for Thomas and Percy, this episode delivered and provided some solid drama between the two special friends. I thought about picking A Snowy Surprise for Spencer as my favorite, but I personally just like this episode more, and it is definitely my favorite for Season 1. The single word I would use to describe Season 1 is rough draft. You can see the vision, you can see what Owen Bartel was going for, but it just wasn't executed very well, and the end result is very rough. I'm not sure if this is my least favorite season of Thomas and His Plarail Friends, but I can't really argue for it not being the worst. But that's okay, because I still kinda like it. And like with any rough draft, it will improve. We saw that over the course of this season, and eventually, we will get that perfect final draft. Next time on the Plarail Friends Retrospective, we'll be taking a look at not only Season 2, but Thomas and Rhombus, as well as the 5 remade Season 1 episodes. It's bound to be an hour-long video, which definitely won't be too ridiculously long for a Thomas video. What do the next stages of Thomas and His Plarail Friends have in store for us? Well, that's a story for another day. And that was the first episode of the Plarail Friends Retrospective. While I clearly envisioned this video as an April Fool's joke, I ended up having a lot of fun making it. Parodies are fun to make, sure, but it was also fun to revisit these old videos I made and give my thoughts on them. So if you guys are interested in me doing more of these Plarail Friends retrospectives, please let me know. I'm willing to do more. And hey, there's always next April Fools. Well, to keep up with the Unlucky Todd parody, I guess it's time for this video's pick of the week. This week, I'm going to shout out How I Made Lego Mini Gordon by Larry's Lego. Larry makes really good mini Lego Thomas and Friends models, and his latest video about how he made Gordon is very good. Give his videos a watch, he deserves some love. And now we're at the part where I give you updates about my channel. As you guys can tell, I have not uploaded much lately. That is because I don't have anything to upload right now. I've been pretty busy and I'm not going to rush out a video I'm not passionate about. With that being said, I will be back to my filming set in May and you can expect videos to return then. I said in the description of the Thomas and Diane compilation that Season 4 of Thomas and His Plarail Friends will return May 17th. So expect that date to be the day when uploads return. But with that being said, I think that's finally it, folks. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and, as always, best wishes until we meet again. Bye-bye.